Hey, everybody. Listen, I just recorded a very interesting January 6th video that may not appear for a few days. It's being edited. It may be a day or two. I'm not sure. You're watching this. I hope I've kicked this out immediately, January the 6th. I did a video that you were obviously very interested in. It really did a great job in impressing people who never really took the time to think about what would be demanded upon someone who's going to do rigorous, real research on eyewitnesses and how would they have investigated to find out some of these claims. And in that video, I had 26 examples that was presented showing various situations in the Gospels where if this is eyewitness, if someone claimed they got this from eyewitness testimony, how would they have, received or how would they have gathered the insights to know that material? I went through the Magi. I went through briefly, right? Gave you really clear, fast, quick examples of various examples. Take, for example, the centurion's son, where he heals him from a distance, right? And I'm just giving you one. I'm honing in on just briefly to give you an example off the top of my head. One is the centurion's son who's healed. He just says the word and go, and boom, he goes home and finds out that his son is healed. Holy smokes, miracle. Okay, how do they know this? Well, the New Testament doesn't say Peter followed him to his house, figured it out, brought back the information, and told the rest, and someone wrote it down later. Nobody says Jesus followed this Roman centurion to his house and found out his son was cured of what the ailment was or whatever. In a lot of these circumstances, in order to have an eyewitness claim that you know is the case, someone would have had to investigate and went and found out that information. Who? When? We're not told. There is no data about a lot of this information that's possibly investigatable. And I say possibly as in it's a possible outcome. There's no way to say it's impossible. But then there are some examples that absolutely make no sense whatsoever in the Gospels. And you can go to Acts for this, but we're going to unravel this as long as you approve. That the author shouldn't even know. There was no one present. No one was there that could say what Jesus said at the prayer that was in the Garden of Gethsemane. So what kind of excuse will you make for the author to argue for eyewitness claim in this case? You could try and do it with the other examples to try and prove this one right here. This one goes back. But when we already see the author engaging in what's called omniscient narration or omniscient authorship, that means he has a God's eye view and he's crafting a story so he knows details and events even when no one is present. Therefore, there's no eyewitness there to give this information to you, the reader, right? It's an author who's writing a heck of a story. And so I was wanting to pitch this to you. I wanted to get my fillers from the audience since a lot of you enjoyed that material. And the fact is, I had lots of comments of people who said, eyewitness, schmeyewitness, you're strawmanning Christianity. You're assuming that Christians believe these are eyewitness accounts or that these are literally eyewitness testimony of what really literally happened in every scenario or that the Gospels are eyewitnesses. And I'm like, I'm not. Have you been not on the internet at all? If you go to channels like Testify, right? Eric Manning, who blew up in his apologetic channel, which I get along with Eric. We disagree on these issues through and through. Even Michael Jones, David McDonald interviewed Michael Jones. And in that interview, Michael Jones said, hey, he thinks that 3 of the 4 Gospels, I believe, are eyewitness or based on eyewitness testimony to some extent. Don't want to strawman Michael Jones. Inspiring philosophy for those who know. But Richard Bauckham, right? He claims that names and how these names are in the New Testament proves historical reliability and that these are eyewitness accounts. So there are scholars, right, who are very conservative, who are claiming eyewitness account testimony for this material. And then you have very popular apologists who are making eyewitness claims for their material. Well, I just did the video saying why the texts themselves prove they're not eyewitness testimony. So I'm getting around to my point. First of all, that claim that there aren't Christians out there making that, and very popular ones at that, you just need to check out. I mean, even Mike Lacona, while he takes a different approach on the Gospels than Lydia McGrew, there's still eyewitness trustworthy material here that we can trust that goes back to Jesus. That's like, I don't think that you can get there. I don't think you can get there. Verisimilitude, which means historically accurate geography, people, places, and things, does not validate or vindicate what these texts are claiming when it comes to the miraculous material. And I say that because the very same historical verisimilitude, geography, people, places, and things, whatnot, you find in Suetonius that describes the Caesars or others, does not give them even an inch of belief in Augustus as the real divine savior of the world and his evangelion, his gospel and such. So I want to finally get to my point and ask you, would you be interested in a methodical, maybe case by case or a few cases per video type of video series where I break down episode by episode what it would take to have an eyewitness claim here, but often in many of these eyewitness claims that these Christians are identifying, for example, I'm going to be interviewing or reacting to, doing a video response to Eric Manning from Testify, where he has 4 clues that show the Gospels are eyewitness testimony or something, which they don't do that. I'm going to, respond to that academically, if you will, and show you why that's not the case. But in one of the examples, the widow of Nain, like that text in the Gospels where this healing miracle happens is practically a rewrite, even verbatim grammatical Greek linguistic affinity to an Old Testament passage, where they're rewriting a story from the Elijah-Elisha narratives into the Jesus narrative that we find in Luke. I believe it's in Luke. I'm off the top of my head trying to memorize. Like, I want to go through methodically, go to each account where what is in the episode in the Gospels says this, what it would take for that to be testimony that is eyewitness, that how would you achieve gathering that information? Like maybe Jesus came back from the wilderness temptation and told his disciples, like I said in my last video? Or is it more likely that this is based on some scriptural antecedent through Hebrew Bible, or even potentially a Greek-Roman antecedent? Because some cases may be that. I know Dennis MacDonald would highlight those. And so I know that the majority of critical scholarship consensus would lean into the literary Septuagint antecedent versus Greek. But either way, I'd like to give some of those models along the way to help you understand why these episodes do not work for eyewitness testimony. Now, at the end of the day, you can't prove that this isn't based on some memory, hearsay, potentially there's an oral background to some of it. We don't know. So the confidence someone would have, the certainty they would have, should definitely go down, and they're relying on faith. Faith, the substance of things hoped for, evidence of things not seen. They are relying on something they have to believe that is not there based on the evidence. And for those who try to act like faith is not separated from the evidence, the story in Hebrews that gives you this about faith gives you depiction after depiction of biblical characters from the Old Testament, where their case, all the evidence in their situation points to the impossible. Like, Sarah is old. She's 90 or 99 or some really old age. She is barren, does not have a kid, and God says, I promise you're going to have a child. These cases are like impossible cases that God miraculously fulfills his word on, and they use those as accounts of faith. Based on their faith, God accomplished the thing he promised. So when you look at faith, you have to understand it's not the evidence that says this is eyewitness. You believe that. You want to believe that. But when you're making historical claims and the evidence that is contrary to your claim doesn't support it, I'm going to call that out. And I would do this for Islam. I would do this for Judaism. I do this for Christianity. The 3 monotheistic religions that I have mainly engaged with in my life. And the question, again, arises. Would you like to see a methodical breakdown of that in a series? I'd like to hear from you in the comments section down below. Let me know your thoughts. By the way, January the 6th, the morning of, from the night of the 5th to the 6th, we literally have the birth of Jesus being celebrated, the baptism of Jesus, and the water into wine miracle in Cana by Eastern Orthodox. I believe that there's Coptic Christians that celebrate it the same day, but they are celebrating these things. It's the 12th day from Christmas, the 12 days of Christmas. You have this winter solstice period to this point. And Dionysus, in my upcoming video, you'll see at the intro, make sure you stick around because we're going to get into some interesting stuff about the birth of Jesus that hints at mythic or legendary origins in Luke. But Dionysus himself, this day, there was a 7-day festival in the Nones of Janus, January the 5th, which is the 5th to 6th, was celebrated. He had a Theodosia, God's gift day, where his epiphany, his presence, his manifestation as a deity would happen. And sure enough, it's a wine miracle, just like the Eastern Orthodox celebrate for Jesus, which Epiphanius mentions 300 or so years after Pliny the Elder wrote this material. And these miracles for Dionysus go way back. So I'm actually thankful to Inspiring Philosophy, Michael Jones, while we disagree, for him, making his criticism about Dionysus that one time, and then I made my video. I had no clue what the outcome for Dionysus would be in this long, drawn-out research I've been doing, along with Neil from Gnostic Informant, and seeing connections between him. So stay tuned for that episode, right? I'm going to keep cooking. I'm about to get things going again. We're going to start making some stuff happen. But I wanted to know from you, would you be interested in that kind of series? If so, let me know. I want to hear it from you in the comments. Your thoughts about a methodical breakdown of the eyewitness claims and how we can put that to rest, because I think it's silly. It really does diminish the confidence of these apologists who claim with so much certainty and confidence, we know because they know a geography or they know about a guy. Mind you, I have a video. I'm going to sneak peek this here. I'm not going to tell you the whole thing because it's going to end up like 3 hours long. I can't help that this was long. Forgive me in advance, but it will be hands down, I can say this with confidence, the best Luke Acts borrowed from Josephus documentary video on the internet. No one has ever done anything that is going to be this exhaustive. Now, how do I know? Because the man himself, Steve Mason, who wrote the book, who covered this material methodically, wrote the script to the documentary that I'm going to be editing. And that documentary is going to explain to you the history of the scholarship for Josephus and why the old scholars used to think Josephus was just pure raw data. He's just collecting information. He doesn't have an agenda himself to crafting a story, his own production. He's just collecting a bunch of historical information and putting it in there. So all you do is just look at the data, and Josephus is almost like looking in an encyclopedia. You're just pulling out information and using the information for whatever you're using over here. No, Josephus has his own agenda and his own intentions and his own goals, and Luke Acts uses material from it, and it sticks out like a sore thumb. It'll be shocking to people who've never really thought about this. What does that do? Think about the questions that come from that. If Luke Acts is using Josephus for his historical information, and we can make a confident case that is so, then how do you trust Luke Acts? And he gets much of this information erroneous. He mistakes what Josephus is saying in some cases. He gets it wrong, and why he gets it wrong is also interesting. How do you trust Luke as the most reliable historical? He's a historian who's documenting what happened, and he's a traveling companion of Paul. All of that stuff that you hear, come on. You'll see what I'm saying as we unroll these things. So I'm excited. I hope that you are. Please let me know in the comment section. Make me feel good. I really do get motivation from seeing the support, the audience members who have my back and want to see us start getting back into this kind of stuff. Let me know. I'm ready. It's a New Year's. I got to bring back some good stuff because you know what? We were cooking really, really well over the past few years. Let's get back to cooking. let's get back to cooking. And I want to do so in a manner that isn't so derogatory and vitriolic towards some of these people, because sometimes I get burnt out from doing that. But there's nothing wrong with saying where people are wrong, where there are errors being made along the way. And you can do so without having to be rude to an individual while still saying, I think they're wrong, and here's why, and here's the evidence. Anyway, I love you all. Happy New Year's. Merry Christmas. I'm doing much better. My mental health is doing much better, of course. And I'm ready to start cooking, dude. Who's with me? Let me know. And never forget, we are MythVision.